Hello, and welcome to today's lesson. We'll learn how to make checkboxes and radio buttons, and how to process data from them. Let's review an example. I'd like to find out if customers search for hotels, guest houses, or both. Checkboxes are the best way to find out. So how do we go about creating one? Again, I'll start by writing the input tag. I'll set the type attribute to checkbox. Next, I'll add an ID attribute so that I can label the checkbox later and set its value to hotel. After a refresh, we can see a checkbox has appeared. Now I'd like to add a label to it. Once again, I'll just use the label element. I'll set the value of the for attribute to hotel so it matches the ID. Finally, I insert the actual description text and refresh the page. There's an advantage to using the label element for inserting descriptions. If I want to check or uncheck the checkbox, I can click on the description tag now as well. Then I'll add yet another checkbox, using a keyboard shortcut to insert the code to make things a bit faster. After refreshing the page, we can test both of our checkboxes and see how they look. Notice that the checkboxes are unchecked by default. What if I wanted to change that? All that I have to do is add the checked attribute to the input tag and set its value to checked. After refreshing the page, we see the first checkbox is checked by default. Sometimes select options can be mutually exclusive, meaning I can only choose one. Let's see how to cope with that. Again, I'll start by typing the input tag. I'll set the value of the type attribute to radio. I now have what's called a radio box. A group of these switches has to share a common name. Let me add the name attribute and set its value to language. Next, I'm going to add an ID with the value of English. Finally, I'll add a label. I'll add a label element and set the for attribute to English. Because I'd like to have one other option, I'll insert the code for another radio button switch. We can see the result after refreshing the page. Note that, unlike with checkboxes, only one option can be checked at a time. At the end, I'd like to show you how to process checkbox data. First, I have to supply a name of a script to the action. Also, both of the checkboxes have to have the name attribute set up. I'll assign the name Hotel to the first checkbox and Guest House to the second one. Notice that, unlike with radio buttons, two checkboxes cannot have a same name. So far, we haven't set the values that will be transmitted to the server when the form is submitted. Let's go ahead and do that. The value attribute, which can be added to the input tags, will help us out. I'll add a value attribute to the checkbox and set the value to hotel equals on. If the checkbox is checked, this value will be transmitted to the server when the data is sent. To make it a bit easier, I'll use the clipboard to insert the value attribute to the second checkbox and both radio buttons as well. Finally, I'm going to create a submit button and refresh the browser. Now the form is ready for processing. I'm going to check the guest house option and select English as the preferred language. After submitting the data, the server returns our result. Now we can review the fields I selected. Thank you, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next lesson.